Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Maisres Pei Gimel Halacha Aleph. We're learning today Daf Chaf Hey, and we left off on Daf Chaf Hey Amid Aleph, 3 lines from the top of the Amid. So we learned on Abraisa on Daf Chaf Dalad Amid Beis that the majority of how people or what people grow their produce for, the options are whether to sell them in the market or whether to take them home, will determine, in the cases that we have been learning, when a person finds produce, obviously in the scenarios where it's mutter for them to keep the produce, the question then will be, what should they do vis-a-vis tithing them? So the Braisa says that b'makoim sheroiv machnisim lebatim. I'm going out of order, but let's just keep on going. If most people take the produce home, so then the presumption is that the produce that you found when you are allowed to keep it was also grown to be taken home by the owner, which means the owner did not yet tithe it at all, which means also that even though it had the Gemar Malach in the field, but produce that's going to be taken home isn't under the obligation of being tithed after the Gemar Malach. You have to have the Pnei Habayis, etc. So therefore, muter le'ichal mimenu aray, you are allowed to snack from it, and when you take it into your home, umesakna vaday. If you find produce b'makim shaharoiv machnisim l'shuk, we learned in the Braisa. So again, we follow the majority. Following the majority would mean that the produce that you found already underwent its gemar melacha. And since we're going to follow the roiv that it was made to be sold in the market, we also now should presume that the owner, who was not even allowed to snack from it, because that's it, there was gemar melacha, also for sure took off the trumas u'maisros. We don't know who the owner is. The Raif people were Amaratzim. So we have to give it a status of the Mai, and therefore, Asur loichal mimenu aray umesakna the Mai. That's simple. But then the Braisa had a Gavaldik statement. That was the end of Chavdal Damad Beis. That if you live in a place where mechza, which means half of the people bring them into the homes, half of the people sell to in the market. So the Braisa says you got to do both. You got to do both. The words of the Braisa is, again, at the end of Chav Dalet, that misakna demai and machnisa labayis misakna vaday. Now, there are many ways of learning the issue that Rabbi Yoina had, and we're going to explain Rabbi Yoina the way the Pnei Moshe learned it, and that is that originally the understanding of the Braisa is that the same produce that you find lechatchila prior to bringing it home, you are allowed to eat it aray. I'm sorry. Prior to bringing it home, you have to always be machmer. You have to assume that it was made to be sold in the shuk. And therefore, even though you can't even eat aray, all you need to do is misakna demai. You get away with only taking off the demai separations. But then when you take that produce home, well, now that you took it home, maybe it was lachatchila meant to be taken home. And now you have to be misakna vaday. And the problem with that is that, again, the way we learn the Gemara is that one is not allowed to separate the trumas u'maisros out of sequence. And it's going to chap that you separated it out of sequence, because the Mai only demands for you to take off maiserishin from it trumas maiser. You don't have to take off truma gedola. When you take it home, we're saying besakna vaday. Now you're going to take off truma gedola. So that's out of the sequence. So the way the Gemara resolved it up until now, again, according to the Pnei Moshe, is that the Braisa is not telling you that you should take the produce home or eat it before home and take it home. The Braisa is telling you that if you plan to take it home, then lechatchila treat it like the Braisa says, that it's produce that was meant to be taken home, which means that you're not allowed to eat it, and you have to be misakin it vaday. Be misakin it vaday. If you only plan to eat it in the market, then at least do the chumrah of be misakin it, like it is machnisan lashuk. Then you can't even snack of it, but you only have to be misakin demai. That's the way we learn pshat. And then we concluded yesterday, Shir Kevan, just to make it clear, is that if you actually eat this in the market and you take it home, and a chanami, in that case, you will end up taking the trumas u'maisros out of sequence. The question is, the Braisa doesn't want you lechatchila to do it. That's the way the Pnei Moshe learned. The Braisa was telling you, you have to choose where you're going to eat it. and then behave accordingly. Behave accordingly. The Gemara right now is going to bring both a opinion b'shem Rab Shimon ben Yochai Tzadok and on Daf Chafei Amud Beis an opinion of Rav Matanya, that they are going to add a very important detail, especially Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Tzadok's detail, which is you have to make a stipulation that will explain when we learn it inside. His detail will automatically resolve the issue of out of sequence, all according to the Pnei Moshe. And therefore, it's going to be a secondary benefit from what he's saying, aside of addressing the issue that he's going to want to address, is that you don't have to say that the Baraisa is demanding for you to choose where to eat it. We can go back to the way we understood the Baraisa lechatchila, that ibemarkim, that it's mechza al mechza, same produce. Before you take it home, be mesaken it demai. The moment you take it home, be mesaken it vaday, and there won't b'chlal be an issue with out of sequence, as we'll explain. Rav Matanya addresses the primary issue that we didn't explain yet by resolving it, not by making a stipulation, but by making a specification. You'll see what that means. But the issue of Rab Shimon ben Yochai Tzadok, that you resolve the out of sequence, that we will not get from Rabbi Matanya. In other words, what we're going to be learning in the bulk of Daf Chafei, both Amud Aleph and Amud Beis, is just going into greater nuance about this case of the Brais. After the Gemara closes this sugya, we're going to open up a new sugya. We mentioned a few daf ago that even when a person is planning to take their produce home, which means that even though there's gemar malacha, you can still snack from it. There has to be a kvius. That the minig, the way people behaved is that anything that was smooth on a threshing floor, that's not all items. All right, the fruits that we have been learning about are not smooth. They only are put in a basket. But grain, items that undergo a miruach, things that are on a threshing floor, people, the way they behaved is that no one would remove product from a threshing floor prior to taking off Truma Gedolah. Even if you would be allowed a snack. Everyone took off Truma Gedolah. The Gemara is going to wonder whether lechatchila you should also take off the maisres. Or this concept is only by Truma Gedolah. And the Gemara is going to prove, let's see how far we're going to get, maybe we'll get into Daf Chavav, that there was never an inyan of taking off maisres prior to the Re'iyas Penei Habayis. That means that lechatchila, even though people took off Truma Gedolah by items that are smooth on a threshing floor, by items that have a gemar malacha, not on a basket, not on a bundle, not on a pile, but on the threshing floor, they wouldn't remove it off the threshing floor prior to taking off Truma Gedolah, but they allowed themselves to bring it home, and only afterwards would they take off the other maisres. That's going to be today's daf, but the main focus will be, again, we are in daf chafei, we are 3 lines from the top by the dot. Rabbi Yossi Berabun says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, that says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Tzadok. And again, guys, we're going with the Pnei Moshe. So if anyone here is trying to follow along, whether you're learning out of the Art Scroll, whether you're learning in the Marafulda, the Rashirilio, you're not going to hear what you're hearing over here. We are following the way the Pnei Moshe learns the sugya. So we have items that you found, even though it's hefker, but it was only hefker after the Gemar Malacha. So it's not exempt from Maisris. When you are allowed to keep it, you're not always allowed to keep it. Many times you have to do a Shabbos Haveda. But in the cases where you are allowed to keep it, you have to resolve the Maisris. Okay? And we had the case, we're going on the Mechza al Mechza, that if half of the people take it home, half of the people sell it in the market, we have to apply to it the stringencies of both. And the way we are up to right now is that you don't get to do it with what you found. You have to lechatchila determine where are you going to eat it. If you're going to eat it in the field, what's the worst case scenario if you're going to eat it in the field? That it was made to be sold in the market. And if it was made to be sold in the market, then the owner was already misakin it, but he's an ama'aretz. You got to take off the mai. If you're taking it home, what's the chumrah? The chumrah is that maybe the guy lechatchila made it to take it home, which means he took off nothing, which taka means you can snack from it. But when you get home, you have to be misakin it vaday. Okay. Says B'Shem Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Tzadok, he agrees with this. He's not challenging the Braisa. He's telling you a given that the Tanoim didn't have to say, but the Amoraim have to say. That is not sufficient. There was some other step that has to be taken. And what is that? Tzarich lahasnois v'loimar. Let's go in the case, in the mechza al mechza, that when you are choosing to eat it in the field, okay, what's the chumrah in the field? That you can't even snack from it, because maybe the owner was going to merchandise it. And the owner is Amaretz. Not that we know, but the Roiv were Amaratzim. Which means prior to the Mai, you cannot snack, but you have to snack. You can't just separate the Mai. You have to say the following stipulation. Im ma'oisa shamachnis lashoki. I'm taking off the Mai, but you have to say, I'm only doing it if indeed the owner, the balabas, was planning to merchandise it. Which is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because that means that there was a Gemar Malacha. That means the owner was unable to snack. That means the owner took off the Trumas Umaisris. Because of him being an Amoritz, it's the Mai. Then Masha Asisi Yasu. Then what I did is effective. But you have to verbalize. But the Imlav. But if the owner did not intend for this to be sold in the marketplace, if the owner actually intended to take it home, now if the owner intended to take it home, did the owner take off anything? The owner took off nothing. If that was the case, what I'm doing right now is nothing. Lo yosisi klum. Now, I want to read the Pnei Moshe. He'll explain the Gavaldik why you have to make this Tanai. And now, once you have to make the Tanai, I'm going to go back to the issue of Rabbi Yoina. And B'derech Memela, you're going to see how that's resolved also. We're not resolving the out of sequence. We already left that yesterday. We're addressing something new. Now, B'chlal, what is the case of Rab Shimon ben Yotzadek? That in itself is not clear. To be able to learn and understand properly in the 45 minutes that we have, I want to begin with the inami of the Pnei Moshe. The first and the second are different. The Marafult, everyone has a different way of taking this. The inami is 8 lines under the Gemara. Chevra, it's important. Take your time. 8 lines. It's in the Divrei HaMaschal of the Tzarech Lahasnois V'loimer. I mean, the Pnei Moshe begins 1 line under the Gemara, but scoot down 8 lines. Inami yesh lafarish. Another way of explaining this Gemara, that this Rabbi Yosi berabun, right, which is b'shem Rabbi Yechanan, b'shem Rabbi Meir Tzadok, nami ha-sefer koi, but I want to focus on the sefer. Mechz al mechz. And through his statement, ubalataretz hakushya loinem seisa magdim, it's out of sequence. Mishum the mefarish, the way we resolve that is the besode who mesakna demai. When you eat it in the field, like we said, you take off the mai. And when you take the same produce home, lachatchila, then you're mesakna vade kidamasik, as the Pnei Moshe will explain. But v'hachi kamer, but now he says the following. Hada parach, this that you asked, loinem seisa magdim, lav kushihim. Why not? Because the haba lav hachi, forget about the out of sequence. That's the key. He's not coming to answer the out of sequence. There is another issue. When you take off the demai, you have to make a stipulation and to say that what I'm doing is only valid if the owner Taka had in mind to take it into the shuk. Why? Because because if the person would not make that stipulation, guys, don't forget by mechza, it's half and half. Half and half, legally, we follow the majority. When there's no majority, you can't stamp say, I'm going to be stringent and then be lenient. Half and half. Maybe it wasn't this way. V'hadinu. Now, if the owner had in mind to take it into the house, what does this really need? Then this would need vaday. Not now, guys. Not in the field. But it would need the full trumas u'maisres when you take it into the house. Now, let's think about it. Well, what are we saying? When you eat it, before you get home, you only have to take off the mai. That was a very simple question. Aviv, if the owner Taka had in mind to bring it into the house, did he take off Truma Gedoyla? No, he did not. Which is Taka why we're saying that if you take it home, you have to take off Truma Gedoyla. How can I take off? What's the mai? What do? I take off my sedition. Guys, when I take off my sedition, normally, that is mesukan from Truma Gedoyla. It has no Truma Gedoyla in it. Here, maybe the Maiserishan itself is not kosher yet because Yutaka didn't take off Truma Gedoyla. Nimtseisa, Trumas Maiser, And by the way, the Meiser Rishon you end up eating. Okay, but you take off Trumas Meiser. But when you take off Trumas Meiser, you take off 10% from the Meiser Rishon. The Meiser Rishon must already have been fixed from Truma Gedoyla. But maybe this is not fixed from Truma Gedoyla. Maybe this is Tavula the Truma Gedoyla. You got a problem. You can't stam. In other words, when you give it to the Kohen, you're not helping anything. It's not kosher what you're doing. Now, what's the solution? Lefikach, the solution is make the stipulation.
I'm sorry, but is it because it's out of sequence or it's because it's not the right amount? No,
not out of sequence. In other words, when it's mechza al mechza, how can you go ahead and say, okay, before you take it home, the way we learned until now, choose where you eat. You can eat it in the field. Eat it in the field. Be the most machmer, which is you can't even snack. But hold on. But that also allows you only to take off the mai. And once you take off the mai, then you can eat the whole thing up in the field. How can you take off the mai? Maybe the guy planned to take it home. Maybe the owner did not take off Truma Gedoyla. And you're beginning with Meiser Rishon. You're beginning with Trumas Meiser. You don't have the right to do that.
That sounds like it's out of order.
No, not because it's out of order. Forget about the out of order. When I take off Trumas Meiser comes from Meiser Rishon. That Meiser Rishon has to be fixed from Truma Gedoyla. Since it's mechza al mechza, maybe the owner had a mind to take it home, which means maybe the owner did nothing. He didn't have to do anything yet, which means there's 50% that no Truma Gedoyla was removed. You can't do that. And this is the solution. So when it says in the Braisa that if you choose to eat it in the field, you have to be misakin it only the mai. And then, you know what you do, Vlad? Then it's not the way we learned until now, either or. We want you to do both. When it's in the field, take off the mai. But say that if the owner planned to take it home, what I'm doing now is meaningless. Because it's regardless meaningless. Because if the guy planned to take it home, you can't take off just Trumas Meiser. You can't do that. Not because it's out of sequence. Because you cannot take off Meiser Rishon prior to resolving the Truma Gedoyla. Can't do that because there's Truma Gedoyla in the Meiser Rishon. Now, what do you benefit from that stipulation? Because like this, when I make that stipulation, miman afshach. If the guy planned to sell it in the market, which means that he took off, but it's chayiv demai, so what I'm doing is good, then I can eat it. If the guy planned to take it home, I'm saying what I'm doing is nothing, which is right that I can snack from it. But when I take it home, now I'm a sakin et vaday. What did I benefit on the side? Now there's no out of sequence issue. Because when I take it home and I'm a sakin et vaday, I'm starting with Truma Gedoyla because when I'm taking it home, I'm saying that what I did in the field was nothing. That's it.
If you just take to the field and give it to mine, what if there's never any Truma Gedoyla?
No, that's what we want. Normally by Demai, Demai is based on the premise that Truma Gedoyla for sure was removed.
No, I know, because in this case we don't know if Truma Gedoyla was taken.
Why don't we know? Because we don't know whether the owner planned to take it home. That's why we don't know. In other words, the point of Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzadek is that it's not. You can't just say you decide where you're eating it. That's not enough. You don't know what the owner had in mind to do. So in both scenarios, we're not done yet. That's only 50%. He does the other half the same way. Says you have to make a stipulation regardless, not because of out of sequence. You can't take off the mai if there's a chance that Truma Gedoyla was not removed. So you say, if the guy take a plan to merchandise it, which means all I need is the mai, this is the mai, and you're going to give it to the kohen. If the guy planned to take it home, what I'm doing now is nothing. I'm giving the kohen a gift, but it's not Truma. The kohen will get the gift, but what I did is nothing. Now when I come home, I have to take off everything. And when I take off everything, I make the stipulation again. We'll see. They also have to make a stipulation. We'll see what that stipulation is.
If it's
then the kohen is getting for sure more than what he needs. But because of the need of a stipulation, the way the Pnei Moshe is resolving, there's never going to be it out of sequence. So you tackle lechatchila, the same items that you find, you can eat it in the field, separate the mai, and take it home, and eat it and be mesaken et vaday. As long as you make the stipulation, you resolve it.
And if it's not 50-50, if it's 55-45?
So like this. So the first shtickle of the Pnei Moshe, which is, I'm not reading it inside, holds that even if it's a majority, he holds you also have to make the stipulation.
So why?
Because he's not comfortable. Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzadek was not comfortable here to follow the majority. Which, by the way, makes a lot of sense. I want you to know that following the majority is not something that we always do. We said yesterday, by money, we don't follow the majority. Even by Dina Is, I'll tell you even better. The whole Demai is that we don't follow the majority. The majority of Amaratzim took off all of the Trumas Umaisras. So he's just being more machman. He wants you always to make a stipulation. But I want to focus on the Mechza al Mechza, because by the Mechza al Mechza, we get an additional benefit, according to the Pnei Moshe, that he resolves the question of Rabbi Yoina. Let's read the words inside the Gemara. Shaloi tehei ma'oisa shamachnis lebatim. In other words, why do you have to make the stipulation? Because maybe the owner was taka planning to take it home. The owner was planning to take it home, then the owner didn't do anything. Then him say so. Trumas meiser. If you're gonna, the Baraisa is saying only separate trumas meiser, which is what the mai is. You only separate and give. You separate meiserishin, but you keep it. But the trumas meiser you give to the kohen. But how can you give that trumas meiser to the kohen when that trumas meiser is not rectified food? The kohen is not allowed to eat it. The kohen won't be allowed to eat it. Why not? Because maybe that trumas meiser is still tevula le truma gedoyla, which is beautiful. So since how can the kohen eat it? It might have in it truma gedoyla. It's called tevel. You have to make a stipulation. Since you have to make a stipulation, now we automatically resolve the out of sequence, and we're not done yet. Now, according to the Pnei Moshe, according to the first Pnei Moshe that we just made mention, that the Pnei Moshe really holds that this has to be made regardless, even b'makim deroiv, even by the roiv, then you can see how the words in the Gemara is that in the case of mechza al mechza, I'll finish reading it. According to the Inami, the mechza al mechza is a little bit difficult to read in the Gemara because we're already speaking about mechza al mechza. Okay, zol zayin, be that as it may. By the mechza al mechza. So what did we say? That when you take it into the house, what do you have to do? When you eat it in the field, misakna demai, but the second part, but machnis ala bayis, when you take it home, then we have to say maybe the owner had in mind to take it home. If the owner had in mind to take it home, the owner did nothing. Now that you took it home, now it became a kavua. So now misakna vadai. We're focusing now the second piece on the misakna vadai. Now, same problem. Taking ovada is also a problem. Why is it a problem? It sounds like, what are you talking about? I'm being the most machmer, right? I'm taking off Truma Gedoyla, I'm taking off my sedishin. No. V'chash loimer, I got a problem. Maybe, even though you took it home, maybe this came from produce that the owner had in mind to eat in the shuk. Which means, what would have the owner done? That means the owner already took off Truma Gedoyla. Which means what remained? Only Trumas Meiser. Now, halt up. When I only take off Trumas Meiser, I want to give you numbers. Let's say I have 100 apples. After the Truma Gedoyla, by the Mai, how much do I give to the kohen? 1 apple, because I give him 10% of 10%, and this 1 apple will be matter than 99. If I'm taking off Truma Gedoyla, which is what you're doing, you're taking it into the house. So you took off 2 apples. Then you have 98. How much do you give to the kohen? 0.98. But that 0.98 is being misaken what? The 98. The first 2 never had Trumas Meiser removed from it because it doesn't. Because that's God's law, that Truma Gedoyla doesn't need Trumas Meiser removed from it. But I got a problem over here. What's my problem over here? Maybe the owner did take off Truma Gedoyla. Maybe the guy had a mind to sell it in the shuk. So the owner really took off Truma Gedoyla. Which means, what does this need? All of the 100 apples, what does it need? It has to, halachically, it has to be fixed by removing Trumas Meiser. If I go ahead and I remove 2 apples as Truma Gedoyla, really those 2 apples are not Truma Gedoyla. But then when I remove the Trumas Meiser, I'm only removing the Trumas Meiser on the 98. The 2 apples have in it Trumas Meiser that was not removed. I love him. This is so good. Read it inside. We got a problem. What's the problem? You can't, be machmer, I'll take off that. No. Shema ma'oisan shemachnes lashuki. Maybe be'emes, the owner was planning to sell it in the market, which means the owner already removed Truma Gedoyla. Which means all you have to remove is Trumas Meiser, but everything needs to have from it Trumas Meiser removed. But now that you're not doing that, now first you're taking off the two apples, you're taking off Truma Gedoyla. So the Truma Gedoyla will be Tfula le Trumas Meiser. No, real Truma Gedoyla doesn't have to have Meiser Rishon removed from it. But this might not be real Truma Gedoyla. Now, how do you resolve that? Huh? So here you make a stipulation. What's the stipulation? Don't forget, now, according to the way we're learning, you're taking the same merchandise, you're eating it in the field, and then you're taking it home. In the field, you take off the mai, and you make the tanai. When you make, if I'm saying, Aviv, that maybe what I'm doing now of taking off Truma Gedoyla is not Truma Gedoyla, if I have to say that, I'm only taking off Truma Gedoyla if it needs Truma Gedoyla. If it doesn't need Truma Gedoyla, then what? I'm saying this. Then this is not Truma Gedoyla. If I'm saying it, then when the person will take off Trumas Meiser, he won't take off 0.98, he'll take off 1. Because he's saying that maybe what I'm doing is not accurate. In other words, as long as you verbalize, I want to say the bottom line is just to say that what Reb Shimon ben Yotzaddik is saying, that in the second case, that when you take it home, not only, the Brisa says, Mesak Navadai, he's not only saying, stipulate, I'm only taking off Truma Gedoyla if indeed the owner had a mind to take it home, but through doing that, it's going to remind you to take off a bit more. You'll remember to take off Meiser Rishon, not only for the 98, because the 2, you didn't say it's Truma Gedoyla, you said, if the owner had a mind to take it home, then the 2 is Truma Gedoyla. And if not, then it only needs a Truma, then everything needs Trumas Meiser. So then you'll take off Trumas Meiser for everything.
Oh. Follow this.
Yep.
100 apples in the field.
Yes.
You took off Truma Gedoyla.
No, in the field you took off only the Mai.
Sorry. But you took off the 2%.
You don't. You don't do that in the field. You don't. The owner, who you talking about? One second. The owner or the finder?
You're not sure.
So the finder really in the field only takes off the Mai. It's crazy stuff here. And he said, then maybe what I did is nothing. So you're giving it to the client.
Okay.
But it might not be anything.
So you took off out of the 100 apples. You took off
1.
Took off 1 apple.
Then when you come home, you have 99.
Yeah, but then you still take off 1.
You do both. First, you take off 2% of the 99, and then when you take off Trumas,
because if you're considering that what you did in the field is nothing, that because 2% of the 99 is 2 times 0.99.
but no, I take it back. When you took off, what you took off in the field is only 1. You took off only 1,
and then you come home and you have to take off 2.
And you have to take off
2,
and
then another 1.
You don't have to take off another 1.
I'm still focusing on the first 2 you have to take off.
Okay.
You have to take off the first 2. It's not.
You have to take off 2% of 99.
2 of 99 or 2 of 100. Because you're saying that what you did in the field doesn't count.
It does.
So therefore it's 2.
No. Because the coin who's getting it can snack from it. Because what the coin knows is either this is Trumas Meiser, the Mai, and if it's not Trumas Meiser, then you know what it is? It's Tevel. It's a gift, which you can snack from. That's not a problem. That detail, that's good. You bring that up. Now, Rav Matanya argues, according to the Pnei Moshe, only on the second part of Rab Shimon ben Yotzaddik. And he is of the opinion, this is so beautiful, and by the way, we did learn this a few Masechtas ago, that whenever you have a scenario where you have a suffix, in this case, you get, let me go back to the problem. You take it in the house, you're going to separate Truma Gedoyla, then you're separating from the remainder Trumas Meiser, but the Trumas Meiser, unless you really know what you're doing, you won't give enough percent for everything. So Rav Matanya holds that you don't need to give here exactly 10% for everything. What you gave for the remainder, if needed, halachically, since there's a suffix, will automatically be good for everything. So you don't have to say if this happened or if that happened. His words are, B'koyre shem l'masroisav. B'koyre shem l'masroisav means is that when there's a suffix, and the suffix has to be this type of doubt. This type of doubt is that we don't know what the original intention of the owner is. We don't know what the intention was. In such a case, the removal of the Trumas Meiser would halachically, automatically be good for whichever scenario possible. I want to just come back.
Is that the halacha?
I don't know if that's the halacha. That's what he holds. We had these dinim a few masechtos ago. You have to know what type of doubt. In certain scenarios, we are more flex. We are more lenient when it comes to the percent. As long as you're a koyre shame, you're good. I give you an example right now, Yakir. Everyone does Kriya Shem right now. I'm saying the fact, and in the Holy Land, people do Kriya Shem, meaning people don't actually separate anything. Now, they say verbally that when you have a pile of produce, if you ever buy in a market where they were not yet Toidem Ma'aser, that the top right should be Truma Gedoyla. You don't say the percent. The top left should be my sedition. From it, then everything you end up redeeming on the coin. You end up you do two things. First, you take off Trumas or Maisres, and then you make another bracha for Pidyon Maiser Sheni. There are two steps that we do today. And we don't have to be that precise. Kriya Shem is enough. Okay, Atkan. Atkan the Sugya, according to the Pnei Moshe, what we resolved today, which was beautiful, is that there's no issue with out of sequence, because when you make the Tanai, you'll never go out of sequence. You will always be doing it right. Finished. Everything that we learned, which is beginning with the Braisa, has to be dafke when it comes to fruits or vegetables that don't have their Gemar Malacha by it being piled on a threshing floor and normally having a meruach. Why are we saying that? Because the whole thing was based on the premise of it, that something that you plan to take home, it not only does it need to have Gemar Malacha, true, it also has to be Kvius Lamaiser. The Kvius only happens with Echad Mishisha Devarim. Biblically, Riyas Pnei Habayis, prior to Pnei Habayis, nothing has to be removed. Theoretically, that's true. The fact is that items on the Goyden, items that are placed on a threshing floor, which is normally, as we learned in the Mishnah, it means ultimately the Meruach, people de facto, even though they were planning to take it home, they didn't wait to take off Truma Gedoyla when they took it home. They would take off Truma Gedoyla. No one removed things from a threshing floor. It was almost like thanking Hashem. You have a threshing floor, the ikir was grain, that was the main food. It's time to take it off without, they gave the Truma Gedoyla, they gave right away. And therefore, everything that we said will change. It's very simple. In other words, even where there's a chashash that the guy had in mind to take it home, the Braisa would never say that when you take it home, do a vada. It's not true. Truma Gedoyla is always resolved. Let's read it inside. At Kedoin, everything that we learned until now was because it was a davar she'en loy goyden. Aval davar she'esh loy goyden, but any item which has its Gemar Malacha by it being piled on a threshing floor, and I want to add, and in many cases, and smooth, then even when Roiv, let me go to the case of the Braisa Roiv. Roiv are going to be Machnisan Labayis. Roiv Machnisan Labayis. So I can presume that the owner had in mind to take it into the house. When I take it into that, first I can snack. I take that back. Be'emes, I can't snack. Why can't I snack? Because Utruma's Echad Meshisha Dvarim. People did not remove items from a threshing floor prior to taking off Truma Gedoyla. And the finder will never have to take off Truma Gedoyla. The only thing I'll have to do is Mafrishin Trumas Meiser. And by the way, it means all other Meisers as well. He's saying Trumas Meiser in the case of the Mai. That's the key. Okay. And where do we know that from? Where do we know that from? What are you talking about? By the letter of the law, even something that goes on a goyden, if it was meant not to be sold in the market, by the letter of the law, you don't have to take off Truma Gedoyla. You only have to take off Truma Gedoyla when you take it into the house. No, Kadad Tani, like we have in the following Brais. Matzah peiros mimayrachen basada. when you find peiros, whose gemar melacha is for it to be smoothed out. So we say the following, and then we're going to go back to the din of hefker or not. Is it yours or not? If it is michunasim, produce that's gathered together, when people lose produce, think about it. We had this also in Bavim. It's if something falls out of my pocket, it's not going to fall gathered together. It's going to be scattered. So when you find something, michunasim, mefuzarim, has to do with whether you get to keep it or whether there's an owner who cannot give a siman. There was a pile there. So if it's michunasim, first of all, ashurim mishum gezel, because the presumption is that it was not lost. If it's mifuzarim, if it was scattered about, that's enough halachically when it comes to the dinim of Hashavas Haveda for us to presume that that it was lost. Not only is it lost, but there's no siman here. It's produce. All produce look alike. Mutarim mishum gezel. And benkach, regardless, this is the key word, chayavin b'maisres. Stell sich vor, you're chayiv in maisres, but you know what you're not chayiv in? Upeturim mit truma gedoyla. The question is, why not? Why are you patim mit truma gedoyla? How is it different from the braisa? Maybe the owner was planning to take it home, and when you take it home, now you have to do vadai, because the braisa was speaking about items that were in a basket, not items that are on a threshing floor. And this is not the letter of the law. This became common practice that Jews, when we had produce on a threshing floor, we resolved we are not going to remove it from the threshing floor prior to removing Truma Gedoyla. So when you find items that were on a threshing floor, you will always be exempt of removing Truma Gedoyla. Grain and maybe other, correct, primarily grain, maybe some legumes, I don't know. Items that go on a threshing floor, not items whose gemar malach is bundling or basketing or bagging. Shei efsher legoydem shetiyaker el imkei nitrama, only if, even though again the obligation midairaisa is only when there's rias b'nei abayis. But that's the way people behaved. Now that we're speaking about common practice, the Gemara wants to know, what did I just say? I just said that once you take off Truma Gedoyla, this is correct. Truma Gedoyla is one of the Shisha Devarim. Don't forget, once you take off Truma Gedoyla, you begin a process in which now you can't even snack. So the Gemara is wondering whether lechatchila or lefnim mishuras hadin, whether the ideal will be, once you took off Truma Gedoyla, take everything else up, or no, it was only for Truma Gedoyla. Even though Truma Gedoyla rabbinically now will not allow you to snack, there's no inyan. If you want to snack, you have to take off the other Trumas, the other Maisras. But there wasn't an inyan to take off the Maisras. That's the Gemara's question. Maisras that were on the end of Daf Chafei. Maisras meheichon nitalois min habayis or min asada. That's the question. Look inside the Pnei Moshe. Today's Pnei Moshe day. 5 lines from the bottom. Chafei amid base. Maisras meheichon nitalois mishum de tani gabe truma. This concept that now we're focusing on it. That what? That ef shalagoyim shatiyakad ela imkei nitrama. The hilkach boy. So the Gemara is inquiring. Umitzvos hamaisros mehechan italois hein. You see the word in the Pnei Moshe? Lechatchila. Once everyone knows that you don't have to. Even Truma Gedoyla you don't have to. Is it even lechatchila min abayis? Oy af min asada, meaning the lechatchila im hefrisha achar shenitma Truma Gedoyla. That a person is going to say, listen, I took off Truma Gedoyla, I can't even snack from it, so I'm gonna go all the way. The Einamamtin, a person lachatchila should not wait until when he comes into the house. That's the question. So daf chavav, let's see how far we can get relative to our daf. And tomorrow's a big daf, so let's get in as far as we can get. So the Gemara makes a first attempted proof that will be refuted, and let's see if we can get into the first proof that won't be refuted. So the first attempted proof is let's resolve this on the following brayso. And he has a storeroom. Guys, a storeroom is off the goyden. It's already in your storage room. It's filled with produce. And even if you know that he brought it in there the day that he passed away, we presume that what? That nothing has to be removed. Nothing has to be removed. Now, why do we presume that nothing has to be removed? As we'll see in a moment. Because let me go like this. The Havamina. One way is a chaver would have mentioned prior to his passing, guys, know that produce that is in the storage room, I didn't get removed the Trumas or Maisris. He would have said it. It's one way of it. So his silence, the fact that he didn't give such an instruction, is araya that he was masakin it. That's one way of understanding it. The other way of understanding it is that the reason why we can presume that they are completely rectified is because a chaver who does things lechatchila, the moment he took off Truma Gedoyla, he took off all the maasros. This is like a proof that lachatchila, just like people, people don't take off the threshing floor without Truma Gedoyla, and a chaver goes further. So which one is it? So the Gemara says that the reason why we say it's misukanim is because he didn't say you have to do it. That's the reason of it. His silence is the proof.
Rabbi.
1 second, which means without a silence, we wouldn't know. So asks the Gemara, maybe he didn't say anything. Maybe before he passed away, his mind wasn't functioning. Can't prove anything from silence. Fakert, the fact that the Braisa makes a statement that once it's in the home, you can presume that he took off all of the trumas and the maasros. Fakert is right that because a chaver takes it off already in the field. So Amar Rabbi Bun Barchi, it's not true. That this Braisa could be understood that we're only speaking about a chaver that died mitoy chishuv, which means some people die with a lucid mind. In other words, lachatchila, you can remove it after you enter your home. But when someone, a chaver who passes away with a clear mind, would make mention of the fact that he didn't do it. That's the only reason why you know he did it. Because he didn't say to do it. His silence is the proof. Without that proof, we don't know if someone took it off in the field because there is no inyan of taking it off lachatchila. Or at least, maybe. So either way. It's not clear. You can't prove it from the Braisa, either because of a silence, or maybe because of a, if it's because of a silence, then the Braisa is only speaking about someone who died mitoy chishuv. Maybe it's even if he died from with nitrfa daita, even if he passed away without having a clear mind. So it's not clear. So Rabbi Chana,
It's like he died like slowly and like he knows he's gonna die. Like wouldn't it be something sudden?
and if it would be, in other words, and if it would be sudden,
His silence proves
then the silence proves nothing. And maybe in that case, you have to take off trumas from maasros. Or maybe even in that case, if there would be an inyan of taking off maasros in the field by the goyden, if there would be an inyan, then we can assume that a chaver did things correctly. But it's not clear. We can't prove it. Because we don't know what the proof is, whether you do it in the field or his silence. So Rab Chananya b'shem Rav Pinchas will actually bring the first proof. I'll have another one tomorrow from the following. Now this, my friends, is a Mishnah that we have in Masechtas Ma'aser Sheni. Let's quickly review the laws of Biur Maasros. Biur Maasros is not Maasros. Biur Maasros, I think Yakir is back. Biur Maasros is the following. I'm not allowed to eat produce prior to me removing Trumas from Maasros. But make no mistake, after I separated the Trumas from Maasros, I'm allowed to eat the remaining, even though I didn't give it yet to the recipient. Theoretically, I can have grain that I can have a year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years of Trumas in my home. For that, the Torah gives a mitzvah that there are 2 dates throughout the 7-year cycle, objective dates, Machlekes Rishonim. Let's go with the Shita that it is the last day of Chol Hamoed of Pesach. That means Erev Shvi Shel Pesach of the 4th year, and the same Erev Shvi Shel Pesach of the 7th year. Other Rishonim hold it's Erev Pesach, 4th or 7th, be that as it may, that here a person is obligated to actually see to it that what you already separated found its way to a recipient. The Mishnah speaks about a story where various Tanoim, they were on a ship. Rabbi Gamliel was on a ship. He remembered that he has in his home Trumas or Maasros that he didn't yet give away. But what do? He's not there to give it away. So there's a solution. The solution would be that if you have with you, let's speak about Meiser Ani, we'll speak about Meiser Rishon. He had with him both Akiva ben Yosef, who was the Gabbai Tzedakah for Daniyim. He had with him Rabbi Yeshua, who himself was a Levi. Rabbi Akiva gave him a coin to rent a piece of his real estate, or rental, small amount of rental. For Karka, one of the kinyanim is Kesef. So Rabbi Akiva now acquired the land. There's some thing called king and agav. King and agav means that even though normally, if I am gifting to you, selling to you movables, the recipient has to do mashicha. But if I am making a transaction of real estate to the recipient, and I verbalize that together with the real estate, you're getting the movables, so the kinyan that the recipient makes on the land, on the karka, automatically schleps with it the items. So he gave Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef with the land all of the Meiser Ani that he had in his house. He gave Rabbi Yeshua, who was a Levi, all of the Meiser Ish. And that's what he did. Let's read it inside. That Isur Echad Shani Asi Lamud Nasal Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef She'izka B'ay Lani, etc. In other words, the Gemara is just bringing a part of the Mishnah, but it's not just about the Meiser Ani, it's about the other. Now I have a problem. The problem is, where was the produce? The produce was in Gamliel's house. Now, if a chaver lechatchila, when he separates the truma gedoyla, which he will separate from the goyden, lechatchila, the mitzvah would be also to separate all of the maasros, then the Gemara is taking it as a given. He would not have it in his home. The fact that the maasros were taken home, I'll tell you, is arayah. I'll tell you better than that. He said, ani osid lamed. He didn't even separate the maasros yet. He separated and he gave it. He says, that which I will separate, I'm giving. If you separate it in the field, at least it should have been separated already. Is araya, and that also answers another question that the Gemara doesn't have to ask, because the Mishnah there speaks about all of the maasros. The Mishnah doesn't speak about Truma Gedoyla. The answer is because Truma Gedoyla he did in the Goyden. And everything else is not done in the Goyden.